I'm making a fuss over how I think it should be 24.
He's asking the same question I think you asked earlier today, which is, we had this plan development for 30 years. We thought we would never have to use it again. And that's not here. Why are we picking a number that we're going to have to rethink?
Yes, it is.
Right. And I. But
it's fun.
yeah. But if you can have 9 acres of design, like I was saying to Lee, what if because he's saying somebody put together a few properties and do some development and have the bonus.
Cool house.
Well, the standard is design excellence. And if I can do design excellence with this cool little cottage kind of thing and single family homes and all, is that maybe okay? It's okay. It's going to let us flex the site. They're just not going to get the density bonus. Okay. Well, let's,
Is it okay if the cluster versus I say fine, because it may help in certain situations, but it may find those 5 or 6 lots tough with conditions.
Right, and it helps you preserve them.
well, let's have that discussion.
Yeah.
That's probably the stickler.
That's the only thing that's up for grabs, really.
You know what? Let them decide. You can offer people to consider it, but you can't force it. So I gotta get terrorists. I know that we don't have anything on this agenda, but nonetheless.
Keep notes. Oh, all right. So was there anything else in here in the 25 or documents?
Something to take notes on, yes.
Thank you, sir. I printed myself one, didn't I bring it? Oh, it's sitting on my desk with blunt. I'm not sure that this part is between the living protection agreements was certainly intended for single-family homes. No reduction designated woodlands on the parcel. But the code otherwise.
The code says 20% potential reduction.
Yeah. And
The
you should
question
still allow that.
is that no reduction below the 20% or no reduction period? Because if it's no reduction period, and that's the measure of excellence, that's not flexible. And we went over it today in the federal life site because and the ecologist was there saying, it's woodlands, but it's gradual. If we reduce it by 20%, we can enhance the landscaping on the detention. What do you?
That's a great example to raise here.
You guys have an extra copy of the stuff I wasn't here last time. No. He's better at this.
Yeah, I'm lucky to get here.
I know usually sends an email. I cleaned out so much stuff when I went out of town. Before I made the change.
Oh, good.
I saw that. Yes.
Yeah, all I brought was the latest and
This
greatest.
is what we had last time.
Ready to go? Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order, July 10th, Plan Commission meeting. First, we'll start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Blaylock,
Here.
Commissioner Gratiter, Commissioner Levine,
Here.
Commissioner Marshall,
Here.
Commissioner Romanani, here. Commissioner Rothbard,
Here.
Chairperson Brightcott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Turning to the next item on the agenda, the approval of the minutes of the June 6, 2024 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Was there a second over here somewhere?
Second.
Second, okay. All right, any discussion? Anybody have any comments, any changes, any questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Any visitors wishing to address the Plan Commission? We have so many visitors in our audience. Yeah, I guess. All right, we don't have any new business, so we will turn to the old business, which is the discussion of the proposed revisions to the Residential Plan Unit Development Ordinance. And I will turn to Director Witt. Do you want to lead us into this discussion?
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be the lead, but we'll work on that. So what we have in front of you, I hope everybody had an opportunity to go through the draft that was prepared by Tesca. Apologize for the untimeliness of delivery. I think the shifting of this meeting date put everything into arrears with regard to other schedules. So again, my apologies on that. So we do have a revised draft in front of us, and really the purpose for tonight's meeting would be to gain comments from the commissioners with regard to what you've read. We do have an intended discussion on at least one item, which is related to the size of the parcel that this proposed plan development ordinance would take into effect. We have some points of discussion, kind of pros and cons that we'd like to throw out. Ultimately, it's the decision of the commission in order to decide where they want to go. We did receive a few comments from Commissioner Blaylock. I believe I did send those out. I hope I did. If not, if you didn't receive one, I've got it, or I could just read these. There are only 5 different comments on here, so we want to take that into account. These comments have not been incorporated into the draft that you have in front of you tonight, but nonetheless, they should also be considered as well as the draft copy. So at this point, I think what I would like to do is turn this over to Tesca to, they can wrestle with each other to determine who wants to take lead on this, but to really walk us through what they feel are the major component changes from what we saw at our last meeting. So Lee or Michael?
I'll start. Thank you, although I object to being old business, but that's okay.
I'm getting old.
So there are 2 things that we heard at the last meeting that were reflected in the language changes on pages 7 and 8. And the first of which was more specificity regarding the Standing Technical Review Committee. So rather than it simply indicating whatever the mayor says at any given point, we're talking now about specifically identifying the players that would be at that meeting. And there's a benefit to that, specifically of making the applicant aware of the types of expertise that the village will bring to the table, and that they should be expected to be prepared for that. I think that's pretty straightforward. The second is don't have on page 8, we have a second. Thank you very much.
Lee, could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Regarding that. Any other member selected by the mayor for assistance with technical review, would that exclude members of the trustees or plan commission, or Is there any?
In those communities that we work with that have this form, it generally excludes elected and appointeds because they don't want to be in a position to have to prejudice their own review at the time that they receive this in front of you. We try to do it as much as possible with bringing the folks that will be directly involved in writing the review and presenting it before you. The second question was that we brought to you at the sort of last minute last time the issue of our recommendation that there be one or more forms of conceptual review prior to going to the full public hearing process. And so at the bottom of 7, you've got conceptual presentations, and we suggested 2 forms there. One we would call mandatory, and that is before the Plan Commission itself. And this is done after the staff has vetted it to determine whether or not it's ready for a review at the conceptual level. It's also not anticipated that you would take any action on it or make any review comments in terms, I like this, I don't like that. It's really to say, we understand what you're proposing. You should be prepared to include the following kinds of things before you bring it back to us for a full public hearing. The second one was not to include you, to be a neighborhood meeting at which the applicant presents issues, their presentation, what they'd offer ultimately at the public hearing, to get feedback, to get a conversation going with the neighbors so that the neighbors can be prepared and also the applicant can be prepared for the kinds of discussions that the neighbors will bring to them. Again, we are not encouraging either the Plan Commission or the Village Board be participants at that, because there's a tendency, if you show up, for them to think that you're representing the Plan Commission or the Village Board. And what we're trying to do as much as possible is keep you an independent body that has the opportunity to review it without the prejudice of behind the scenes discussion or ex parte discussion. Those were the 2 items that we heard last time we were here. We've received today the copy of the suggestions that Commissioner Blaylock included. And I think that I have 2 questions, and I'll turn them back to you, Carl, which is that going in reverse order under the Section D, Design Excellence, and the baseline for RPD should be no reductions in designated woodlands on the parcels being developed. And so my question is, are we saying no further reductions from the potential 20% that's in the ordinance, or are we saying 0 reductions, period?
We're saying 0 reductions, period, because the Tree and Woodlands Protection Ordinance was clearly based on single-family houses with the current zoning, which I think is 80,000 square feet or, or more than that. So, it's really a whole different animal. So I think the baseline for an RPD should be don't remove any of the woodlands. And then if there's any negotiation on that, that can be as a result of the enhanced design issues.
Okay, so that, as I understand it, you would say base is 0.
Yeah, there's not a right to 20%.
Only if they show that real excellence over and above, then they become eligible potentially for the up to 20%.
Right.
I like that. We were addressing today a discussion of a site that has woodlands on it, and if we stick to the letter of the 100% no touch, we had the potential of not enhancing the stormwater management site that was directly adjacent to it. And we said, well, are we better off making the stormwater detention area slightly bigger and losing 5 or 10% or whatever it would be in the woodlands, I think what you're suggesting as it's over, when they show this other level of excellence over and above, then we'd get the opportunity to say what's in the best interest of the site itself. So I buy it. The second question is focused on section B, minimum area of the district itself. We picked 9. We picked 9 because we know that there was one site that was about 9 acres. You know the site too.
Yeah, we know the site.
Where we thought that it was an opportunity to get a better design out of that site than we would had we not had this tool. The issue is, well, what happens in the case of the Walter Kluwers or the much larger sites? Do they have the potential for breaking that up into too many pieces that don't have a overall design or overall development that is integrated and planned? We talked about it at staff level today, and one of the things we were sort of musing with, and we'd really like to hear your discussion on, again, similar to what we just talked about, the different level. The first level is the sort of minimum standards, which is excellent, and then the second standard, which is over and above that excellence. What if we kicked in the 25 acres as being this way? If you have 9 acres, you're eligible for RPD, but not any bonuses. Any density bonuses, right? Mm-hmm. If, however, you have 25 acres, you become eligible for the density bonuses when you hit that higher level of design anyway.
Well, actually, my thoughts are that 9 acres is just too small to do the kind of development that would preserve the woodland character of Riverwoods, period. I just don't think, it didn't work for the federal life property. Even after they reduced it by 20% in number of units, it still didn't work. It was still an ugly pig.
Do you think that they would have made the minimum standards for design excellence with what they proposed?
No, particularly not after we did some field trips and saw things similar to what they proposed. Okay, because it's hard to imagine the scale of it when you're driving by it down the street, by it down on the street until you see it. Okay, but I just think that, and you know, that was a strange example because it was 9 acres, but it wasn't really, because you had retention pond, you had woodlands, you really didn't have, and actually maybe that's a key is, how do you define? I think somewhere in here it's 9
gross acres.
Well, I think there's somewhere in here, there's something about usable acres or buildable acres or something that I would think would exclude some of the areas on the 9 acres over there that was not really buildable.
Well, that was an important point when we talked about gross acreage. We were dealing with the issues of density. We were saying,
yeah,
if you get a density bonus, it's based on the overall site, right?
Right.
What we're looking at, if I can jump in, page 2, when we're looking at definitions. Well, it actually is a definition, but it's not headed definitions. It strictly says minimum area, minimum site of 9 acres shall be required for all RPDs. It doesn't classify that as, net after you take out the woodlands and after you take out detention. And certainly the woodlands issues and wetlands issues and woodlands issues are not present on all sites, but we do have a number of sites that have all of those. So yes, I think you have to look at that as a total. And I think it would be very difficult to start making a list saying, okay, it's going to be 9 acres, but so much of this can be woodlands, so much of that could be wetlands, and then you take all that out of there, and now you're down to a 5 acre site, yet we're still going to let you do all of this great stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll have to look through it again and see if I can find the area I was referring to. There was something that said, they excluded those other areas, but anyway, no, that was really my thought, was that what I think we're envisioning for an RPD in Riverwoods, I don't think can be done on 9 acres.
I will give you an example where, this is 10 acres, not 9 acres. North of downtown Lake Forest, at the corner of Laurel and Western, which used to be the city's public works facility, and long ago there was a lumber yard and coal yard and everything. So about 5 years ago, the city moved its municipal services building and put that property up for development. And those 10 acres became Kelmscott Park. I don't know why I even remember the name of that place, but it is 161 multifamily apartments, planned for about 48 condominiums and 12 single-family homes. Again, mixed use, all residential, mixed densities. I'm not going to suggest to you that it's the best development you've ever been to, but that's 10 acres was a pretty big site. And a plan unit development made it possible for them to have a development that had 50% open space.
And was it townhomes? Was it condos? What, single
So
family?
the apartment is 3-story apartment units. That's the vast majority of the units. The condominiums were single floor condos in 2 separate buildings. And then they had 12 single family home sites.
Okay, well, and in preparing for this, I went back and looked at, the tours that you had us do. I went back and looked at my spreadsheet on that and the rankings, the way I ranked them. And I looked at the top 5 that I ranked there, okay? The number 1 was 18.5 acres, okay? There were a couple there that were around 10. One I think was 12.5. It was 1 10, 1 9.5. And those were all ones that I ranked high. But when I looked at them, the ones that were 10 and 9 were townhouses and condos. And I'm not sure that's necessarily what we're driving toward here. And that's one reason that I thought 25 was a better number.
I think this is a really great item for you to discuss. I don't think there's a perfect planning answer to this. I think this is a judgment issue based on what's in the best interest of this village, and that's why you are the experts.
I just have a question. So just so I understand this, when you look at 9 acres, that's what you're coming up with here. How did you say you figured that out again? Because you said, I heard 10, I heard all these different numbers. How did you come up with the 9, or how did we come up with that 9 again?
Frankly, we knew the Federal Life site needed a tool to get a better plan. Federal Life was 9.5, 9.7. Yeah. That was not rocket science. That was being inclusive of what we thought was likely to come before you.
Yeah, it just seems like that's such a, I guess that I'm looking at it as a restriction. I almost think that it's almost situational based in a way, because what comes to us and what we have, I guess I'm just kind of wondering that 9, is that, I mean, I'm not saying it's a fixed number, but is there interpretation? Is it open to things? Hey, this is, you meet this requalification, but here we want you to have this, but maybe we could, you know what I mean? Is it negotiable, I guess?
And I will admit that we started from the point that when I was a younger man, I worked on the Thorngate site, and 125 acres, we don't have that again.
Okay.
We're here because we think a tool like the Thorngate plan development ordinance at the time could benefit other sites. And we're rethinking the number.
Well,
125 seems too high. Is 9 too low?
here's my point. What I'm thinking here is you have someone come, they want to be part of this, whatever, right? And they meet all the qualifications, but that one thing, that 9 or whatever stands out, that should be obviously negotiable, I would think, because if you hit all the other parameters, let's say this is something that is good for us. I'm just throwing it out there. That's how other people think about this.
How big is the Walters Kluwer site?
54 acres?
And
It's
And-
well over the 25.
and 10 of it is the protected woodlands?
Oh, about 30% if I.
30% is protected?
I have that information. If you want to give me 1 minute, I can get that for you.
Well, it's more than 20 anyway, or 25, more than 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like at least 40, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Well, I think the idea of going bigger than 9 is, I think it's not only appropriate, I think that's what we contemplate, that it's for a larger parcel that somebody's going to do something extraordinary on. And maybe, who knows, it could be a town center as part of it or something. But I think 9 is far too low, and I wouldn't recommend it. I think there should be a number in the ordinance.
What I'm saying is, I'm sorry. Just back on again. They come, they like, okay, we got all this stuff, we fit every parameter. This one thing we're missing, we're not at that number, whatever. What are you going to do?
Point of order.
I'm going to
It's
say
a th-
no.
Okay,
I'm going to say our ordinance doesn't allow it, sorry, bye.
I'm just asking,
Well, that number is a threshold number, which means that it doesn't come to you unless they met that number. They can't ask for the only thing they could ask for is a ordinance amendment to reduce that number. But until they meet that standard, whatever number you pick, they can't come before you and suggest that they've met all the other standards.
And Carrie,
Yeah.
kind of where I'm coming from with my suggestion here is that all the stuff you're talking about, all the stuff that they have, that you can't do that on 9 acres. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Because we're clearly going to require open space and sustainable building and all sorts of other things. And it's going to be hard to squeeze it all into a
It
small.
would be,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay.
Well, and the way I figure with 9 acres is if I bought my neighbor's lot and annexed it to the one that I have and the vacant one that I bought to preserve the woodlands on, I got 9 acres, right in the middle of a residential area. So it would only take purchasing one of my neighbor's properties, and I could put whatever I wanted basically on it as long as it was attractive.
I'd like to
So-
say that the commission would be exempt from that number. Just kidding.
No. But see, once you put it in writing and shove it into an ordinance, it's there. It ain't going away. So you got to think about some of our lots in the village that are 5 and 6 all by themselves. And if they say to the next door neighbor, hey, let's get into a joint venture, we'll combine our lots and we can put in something. I don't think that 9 is a safe number.
Okay, so I might add something to this, and again, this goes back to internal discussion that we had earlier today, and I think that Lee touched on this earlier. It's really not for us to decide what that number would be. It's for you to consider. However, what I would caution on is, say you get a parcel that's 40 acres. Say you get a parcel that's 35 acres, and you want to divide it up equally. All of a sudden, you got 4 parcels that are less than 9 acres, and now you've got 36 acres of nothing that has incentive to go above and beyond and get you more design excellence than if you let these things be at a smaller number where you could take it bit by bit. The fear would be that somebody takes a large parcel, chops off a piece, and does something, and then comes back later, chops off another piece, comes back and does something. So there's some good and bad to whatever that number is. So you have to balance out the loss of the size of the property versus what you're going to get from the design excellence that's in there. Would you rather have somebody, mandate to be 10 acres where they could do something that's pretty darn nice on 9 acres? That's part of, I think, got to be part of the discussion, because you may not find somebody who's going to develop all of Wolters Kluwer at one time. It may get subdivided into multiple parcels. So just a thought.
Well, then it doesn't have to be a PUD. I mean, it'll be something else.
Yeah, then it could be 9 single-family homes
They
on
can
9
do
acres.
something else. If they want to do a PUD, it has to be bigger parcel. That's my feeling, bigger than 9.
The issue
Our numbers
is
at 120.
that we're looking for a development with continuity, a development that will have the space to have open space, to have landscaping, to have bike paths, to have the things that we'd like to see. And I don't think that there's anybody who's going to say, gee, I can do that all in 9 acres. And then I'll go back and do something else later, and it will look entirely different. And by the time you're through, you're going to have a patchwork community, which is not what we want in the village. Not what I want anyway. I don't speak for anybody else, but it's not what I want.
Maybe I don't understand, but you said you build it, then you come back and do it again. We're allowed to do that? I mean, is there gonna be like a provision saying that's what I'm asking, how does that work?
I would like to see a plan for the entire
At one
piece.
time?
And if they want to develop it over 5 years and want to
Okay.
develop
So you
one
give them a
piece
length
at a
of time. You give them a length
But
of
they've
time.
got a layout for the entire thing so that there is continuity and so that it does meet the standards we're looking for.
Well, then you,
He doesn't have to develop it all at once, but I'd like to see it part of a plan to develop the whole thing.
well, I think that what you're saying is you come in, you do the plan, but you have this 5-year thing here. This is what I'm planning to do, and these are where I'm going to be. So that way you just don't keep adding it on. And then now you have that problem.
Right.
I could see what you're saying.
Yeah, because
Definitely.
I can understand some guys saying, okay, I'm going to develop 10 acres of the property and
Right, and
it's
then they
going
come
to be
back.
glorious. And I'm going to follow all of these standards, but I can only afford to develop 10 acres like this. Now, when I sell this, then I'll have the money to continue and do
Okay.
another
That makes
bunch of whatever. And I wouldn't object to that as long as it was one unified piece and that it followed the design standards that we're asking for.
We can set that. I mean,
Well, in the draft PUD or RPD, it does contemplate doing it in phases. I believe it's in there somewhere that, a first phase, and then there's a period of time when they can come back with the second phase and so on.
So traditionally, a plan unit development goes through a preliminary plan unit development, giving the developer the opportunity to present to you a plan without final engineering. The same way we think of subdivisions typically as being preliminary, more engineering, and then final. And so it's very common for there to be this 2-step process that we've included here. And that often, so the driving force still is, does the density bonus, which is one of the few things the bonuses addresses in here, is that significant enough to invite better design and a better overall plan? Otherwise, the developer just wants to get in there and get out and do a subdivision. And a straight subdivision, you have very little ability to say no to. If they meet all the standards of the subdivision ordinance and the existing zoning, it's ministerial for the most part.
Right.
Which further supports making this something larger than 9 acres.
But I think to the point too of the phasing, you're right. Somebody could come in, and I thought that's what Lee was going to say, is you could get the approval for this 40-acre development and say, I can't develop all 40 acres now, but here's what it's going to be. right? And the village can say, okay, we're going to grant the preliminary approval for this 40 acres based on all of this. And you can do final development in a phase. So come back to us with the, first 15 and then the next 15, like you said.
As long as it's consistent with that overall plan.
Right. So, but the piece you're working from the property you're working from in pieces, overall is 25 or greater
Well,
acres.
isn't the density bonus more like the incentive in a way? Like, we're going to come in here, you're going to get this, so we're giving you that incentive type of thing?
That's the incentive.
That's the incentive. That's exactly what it is. That's the carrot, exactly. Right.
But here's the deal, they come in and say, okay, we can develop, in the beginning, we're going to develop a plot line, that's all we're going to develop. And what's the bonus kick?
Density bonus only kicks in if they've met the next standard higher in
Right.
terms of the other listed special, providing public benefits on the site and doing exceptional design above and beyond what our base standard is.
I'd like to see them come in and do general engineering on the whole site, so the paths are in, and earth moving is done. And then build on one section.
We would expect specifics about roads and stormwater management areas, but unlikely we would be asking in the preliminary PUD phase for the kind of engineering that costs thousands of dollars to generate that we don't typically even review at the plan commission. It's the engineering below the roads and the utilities, et cetera. But we certainly want an overall plan that makes sense. That's the preliminary plan.
Then we got to get rid of the 9 acres.
Get rid of that acres.
I think it's clear that many of us, I don't know what Catherine thinks, but many of us think the 9 is insufficient.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I agree on that. It is too low.
Yeah, too small.
Do we have a preference as to a number?
18? No. I'm just kidding.
18 is a lovely number.
I'm just joking.
No, I think 25 is a reasonable number.
25?
Yeah,
think
I
it's a
would go with
reasonable-
that. The
25 is reasonable.
Yeah, 25 sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, that'll be. Yeah, because we don't have any sites that are specifically 25, so, yeah. So that would be one recommendation that we would put in our recommendation for this ordinance.
So there seems to be a consensus that we
seems-
change the number 9 to 25.
There seems to be, there seems to be.
Okay,
I see a
works
lot
for
of
me.
nodding heads, so yes. A majority of nodding heads anyway.
Without belittling the other suggestions, I think they're easy enough to incorporate without a little discussion.
Okay, yeah.
Do we want to walk through the ordinance or submit our suggestions, or what do you want to do? I mean, I have a lot of suggestions, and most of them relate to sustainability and strengthening the language about sustainability, making specific recommendations of sustainable practices and things like that. I have quite a few of those, which I can raise one by one, or?
My gut, Madam Chairman, is that most of that is not likely to be debatable, that you just make recommendations and we're happy to include them. I think if there's something that is either changes the process itself, we should debate it. If it changes sort of thresholds, we should debate it. But if it's identifying best practices or characteristics that you would want to see in these developments, let's just include the language. And it might be easiest if you just submit that by email or whatever to Steve.
I'm happy to do that. I mean, there are some specifics, especially when we get into the list of modifications to density. I have quite a few comments about sustainability, but it's nothing that would change the process. It's just the obligations would change. They'd be higher standards. And they would be specific. I mean, they would use the word sustainable, which is something that I think the village should start stepping up to. So
You're the chair. You get to decide whether you need further support from your members or.
what does other people think on the plan commission?
Think specifically on what?
What I can do is I can just put my comments in an email and send it out to everybody, and we can debate it at the next meeting.
Yeah, if that's better than on
Because
the
then you
spur
can
of the
see it.
moment
Because
jumping.
otherwise I would just sit here and read through them and, yeah.
So long as you don't have reply all, or we.
No, I will do a blind copy, and it's just for them to read it, and we can discuss it at the next meeting.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I was looking at this one thing, number 6, energy efficient design. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means? I'm reading it, I kind of understand it, but what are we thinking here on energy efficient design?
The orientation of buildings, the materials and the insulation, the number of panes of double pane or triple pane glass, the potential for there being energy other than natural gas or the normal, so solar potentially or
Okay.
other means.
Another way to look at it too would be, there is this concept of what they call a stretch energy code in Illinois and many other states as well. Currently, the state energy code is the 2021 version of the International Energy Conservation Code that outlines minimum standards as far as insulation values, depending on what the component of the building may be, whether it be the wall, the roof, the floor, the foundation, et cetera.
Sure.
A stretch code allows different municipalities the ability to actually amend the state requirements, because the 2021 code is what they call a mini max. Riverwoods cannot enforce requirements higher or lower. That is the range that you need to be in. The state of Illinois has decreed that all state-owned buildings, state-run buildings, have to meet this new stretch code. Now, I haven't looked at it tit for tat to see what those changes are, but typically what the stretch concept is that you put into the code requirements above and beyond what the standard course would be for all other construction within the state, with the exception of state buildings. So that might be another threshold that could be looked at as well. But I think what Lee is talking about picks up practically everything else going on.
Well, I think that today, I mean, that's huge, energy efficient. I mean, that's just a big thing that should totally, obviously, what we're talking about. And maybe we even give, actually, I'm just thinking about this, when we talk about this density thing, you know, maybe this energy thing could be like, hey, if you have this, we'll give you this. I don't, just a thought, because energy is very important these days.
A lot of communities will point to a code that's outside their own building code, like the Green Buildings Association standards for gold and silver, et cetera. The problem with those is that you don't always locally have the ability to measure those. And we hate to put those in place where we got to go get some technology. We have to go get some expertise that we don't have in-house.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
It's granted after you build.
Yeah, and
So if you don't make it, what happens?
use your mic.
The other thing about that LEED certification, which Lee's talking about, is you get the certification after the building is built. So if the requirement is, oh, it's got to be gold certified, and they only get silver, then what are you going to do? Make them take the building down? So, but what I have seen in codes is to require the various elements that LEED is based on. And so a lot of them have got to do with things that, you know, are very specific to architecture, but I do like the idea that we're talking about here about being specific to the energy code. I think that's a standard that people can understand, and it's not asking somebody to go outside of what their designer or engineers would understand.
Yeah, the architects are going to have to measure that anyhow.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Definitely. Thank you. Perfect.
Go ahead. I have a question about on 5A. So it starts on page 8, but actually the content is on page 9. And these are filing deadlines. and it's, I think the preliminary site plan shall be filed within 1 year, and then the final one has to be filed within 3 years, and it says shall, which I think it means mandatory. So what happens if they exceed the 1 year and 3 year?
They
Does the
come
whole
back,
process-
they come back to the
Starts
plan
over
commission.
again.
It starts over again.
Okay, okay.
And the reason you do that is because things change.
Yeah.
Markets change.
And property gets sold and there's just long time before the developer comes back in and
Yeah, I like the deadline. There's just not guidance on what an applicant would do. It doesn't say you have to restart the process over again.
we could be explicit, but that's what happens.
Okay,
It expires.
okay. As long as we know, I think we're good.
And the village doesn't want to see something they approved 12 years ago come back. And without the ability to reconsider it under current conditions.
Were there any other comments about the draft ordinance or questions?
Well, I might state for the record that I violently oppose wind power as generating because of the number of birds that are decimated by wind, by the hoochie guys. And so I think solar is quite fine, but I do not think in an area that's directly adjacent to protected woodlands that you put in wind.
I think we should allow the possibility of wind, but maybe it's a different kind of a blade. You know, maybe something that, as we say, it has to be appropriate to the situation. So if it's
Because
gonna
what
be-
they're doing now is decimating bird populations. It makes me
That's the
sick.
big white ones with the big sharp blades. But there are other kinds of wind, and the technology will change as time
Yeah.
goes on. So I think we shouldn't exclude any kind of renewable energy, but certainly we should look at what it would be like.
Yeah. And those generators that they load the power in are loud as all get out underneath the wind ones.
I don't imagine that the village would approve some big, huge bird slicing wind. Yeah, I mean, but some of the other things, as I mentioned, there are others.
Yeah, well, there are, like solar, I think is wonderful.
Yeah, and wind too, but it doesn't have to be the big blades. I mean, it'd be some other thing, and the technology will change as time goes on, and this ordinance is meant to be forward-looking, so
Okay, I'll let them
I
know.
wouldn't exclude any form of renewable.
Winner,
Madam
winner,
Chair,
chicken dinner, I don't.
Go ahead.
As an example, the next time you're driving down Milwaukee past the Weston, the Devon Bank, if you drive by there, there's these 3 tall pillars.
Yeah.
Those are actually very narrow turbines.
That's what I was thinking
It
of.
generates electricity to power. It's not a lot of power. I think it does the parking lot lights. But to your
That's
point of
exactly
there
what I
are
was thinking of,
alternatives.
and that's existing technology. I mean, it's certain in the future there'll be other things. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, so I will send my comments around for our next meeting, and then if you have any other thoughts or comments or questions, please.
That your response back or your comments should go through Steve.
In fact, I can send it to Steve, and then Steve can do the appropriate dissemination.
That's fine. If you want to send it to me, then I can distribute it accordingly.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, staff report, please.
Certainly. The only thing that we have coming down the pike is we have advertised a meeting to be held on August 1st, which is our anticipated next meeting. This would be the case for the Montessori School at 3140 Riverwoods Road. That particular property is currently restricted by a special use permit to have only 2 buildings on the site. They are in need of essentially a small garage, basically the size of a residential 2-car garage, 24 foot by 24 foot, to park one of their service trucks inside. So it is a very minor development on that sizable property, but nonetheless, because it is subject to a special use, that needs to come in front of this commission. And the thing to understand is though they are under restrictions in that, in the current special use, which was the original special use, which was amended by a second, which was amended by a third, if I remember history correct, all the restrictions that the property is subject to from those previous special use permits still hold true. The only thing we're looking at is the addition of this garage. So it has been published in the paper. It's been set on, I believe, on the website. Within the next day or two, you'll see signs at the property, one facing Brennan Trail, one facing Riverwoods. And we're up for August 1st. So we will get the packet out in time for everybody to have an opportunity to review it. Again, it's relatively minor as far as the scope of development goes, but nonetheless, still needs to go through process. Other than that, we have nothing in the pike.
Okay, thank you. I have no further comments, and our next meeting is August 1st. So, does anybody have anything they want to add or say before we adjourn? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Good night.